jumping? Huh? Yeah? Did you have a good day? Huh? Did you have a good day? Yeah? Yeah? There you go. No, no, you can't get off the laptop. Turd. Come on. Yeah? 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 Right there? Huh? Alright, my friends, so I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table, and that was Frankie the Shelter Cat, who just had to get in on the table here a moment ago, and I thought, here, let me do just a hair of a video on it. What I want to talk about today, and drag on and mumble and grumble and do my best to, entertain you while you're doing whatever you're doing. These videos, like I said before, are a bit lengthy because they are. And sometimes these are something you play in the background when you're doing something else, and there's not a lot of visual to it. It's great for listening to in the car when you got a bit of a ride. Like I said, I'm not a vain person, but I do like BattleTech material enough so that when I'm out on the driving between jobs and stuff with my truck, sometimes I'll tune these things in and listen to them in part so I can critique myself and to argue with myself and to get ideas for future stuff. So what I'm looking at here is what make the Fourth Succession War different from all the others. And like I said, I recently, and I probably already have said it, I recently picked up this one here, the First Succession War. I just started reading into it. I mean, I really am looking forward to getting into what makes lore. This is one of those beautiful things about a lot of game systems, but BattleTech really succeeds at this, is how the lore is consistent and still evolves. We have a lot of evolution. We have new things come in. We have new generations of stuff. I mean, currently we're in the Ilkhan season, Tamer Rising. This is just a recent purchase that I got here in the last 6-8 months. You can see the cats have been chewing on it to boot. This one here I found on our RPG drive-through, and they have lots of material from lots of different game systems on there. A lot of it is PDF, but some places like Catalyst have a lot of their PDFs with an option to have a paperback version. And I've said it a dozen times, and I'll probably say it 100 times more. There's nothing wrong with PDFs. PDFs are great. My issue with PDFs are they're not very conducive to my needs. I don't have a lot of funds. I don't have a bunch of iPads and iPhones, and I have a tiny little Android. I sure am not going to be able to put a PDF on it and really make use of it. I'm 56 and I have to have glasses to read. I'm not trying to kill my eyes any more than I have to. So, and I don't have the luxury of carrying my laptop with me, and I'm a bit leery because this is my only functioning laptop. It's already going on 2 years old, and it's got to last me at least another year at least before I can afford to buy a replacement for it. And so I'm kind of just, on the fence a little bit on just what technology wise I have available to me. It's not an option. But the paperback version is a better option because I can take this with me. I can throw it in a bag. It can be in my car. I can take it with me on my work job. So when I'm sitting there waiting for a customer to show up, or I'm waiting for the pump to fill the tank on the truck from the interceptor, that can take 30 minutes to an hour depending on how thick and nasty the stuff is and how deep it's down there. I have that option of reading this. It's like these videos. So next Friday, we picked up an account in Mason City, Iowa. If you're not familiar with Iowa, that's in the northern side end of the state, up near the Minnesota, not too far from the Minnesota border, which from my perspective, it's almost a 2.5 hour drive just one way to go to do the job. Then it's going to be there about 30-40 minutes to do the job, and then a 2.5 hour drive back. Well, obviously, I can't be reading while I'm driving down the road. And in addition to that job that particular day, the first job I have that morning is actually in southern Iowa, so I'm going to drive down to Knoxville first and get a job at 9 a.m. and at about 9:30 get on the road and drive from Knoxville to Mason City. So we're looking at a little over three 3 hours and 20 minutes because I drive a diesel truck that doesn't get over 65. It actually it has a governor in it, and if I'm lucky, I can get 64 out of it. 67 if I got a load on the truck and I'm going down a really steep hill. Anyway, so on to the next babble. What makes the Fourth Succession War so different? First off, it only lasted 2 years. Officially acknowledged by historians that this particular thing only lasts 2 years. And there's a lot of the perfect storm or the perfect war, depending on how you want to look at it from that perspective. First thing that came into play, in my opinion. Now, I'm sure that they don't all have to apply this way. I'm sure there are other elements that I'm missing or I've not haven't remembered. I mean, I'm not perfect. I don't have a eclectic memory, so that's not an option. It's just like having material and stuff. I've got so much stuff. I forgot I even had this, and one of you guys brought it up, mentioned it in a comment, and we were having a discussion, and I thought, oh, I have this book, and I really want to go in and do a video on it because there's a lot of interesting things in here, and it also shows an evolution of how the buy-in system for points works. Anyway, so I'm not perfect. I can't remember everything, but this is my beliefs as to why the Fourth Succession War was A, so successful, B, was so short in relativity, because the First Succession War lasted 30 odd years. And this Third Succession War, almost 100 years. So it's a matter of perspective. Then you have these crucial elements. It's not quite 5 things. I mean, I know that's kind of like a theme lately. I'm not trying to find 5 things, but because there's probably more than that. But anyway, what we look at from perspective is the first thing is that we have, let's see, set these things off, right? Oh, first time 2 leading houses collaborated for mutual gain. Katrina Steiner's call for lasting peace among the houses was answered by Hans Davion in the early 3020 or so ish. Although it was her intent for what came out of it was not what she wanted to do. If you think about that for a perspective, the Commonwealth and the Federated Sons have had the least amount of conflict between them. The houses, the borders between them are very, very narrow and actually do not connect. Terra prevents this. It's not till the end of the Fourth Succession War that a corridor is created that actually links the two houses directly together. So both houses are flanking the Draconis Combine, pretty potent foe, and almost a ancestral foe for both houses. And then the Commonwealth has the Free Worlds League to deal with, where the Federated Sons do not directly border the Free Worlds League in any significant portion, so they really have no reason to be in each other's grill, as opposed to the Lyrian Commonwealth, the Compelling Confederation, which of course is the opposite border for the Federated Sons, and the same thing goes for the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth does not border the Confederation, so their historically speaking conflict between those two nation states are limited. So this makes a difference. So Commonwealth and Sons have the least amount of conflict between them. So both houses have enough common ground to make cooperation feasible. So Katrina sends out this message to all the House Lords, and her idea is to somehow mediate, get everybody on the same page to have this mutual affection or support or this cessation of war, period. Traditionally speaking, the Commonwealth is not an overly aggressive state. Of all the 5 great houses, they are probably the one that does the least amount overt aggressive acts. Even their military is more designed for stomping, defense, and holding ground than it is for being on the offensive. Not that it can't; it just don't generally do this. This does change occasionally. They get an archon who gets froggy or gets ideas, or the political entities within the confederation or commonwealth have that tendency to want to become adventurism, but for the most part, they're focused. The Lyrans are focused on trade and economics. This is their bread and butter. This is their preferred field of battle. Is commercial warfare, economics. Whereas the Federated Sons have have a mixed bag. They're equally aggressive and equally not. They don't openly, on a regular basis, and purposely go after their opponents. More often, they're responding or they're retaliating against stuff that they've done. Their opponents have done to the Federated Sons. The Avians themselves are pretty, even as a family, their history, are pretty savvy politicians and nobles. These people understand that a lot can be gained through peace. So when Katrina puts out this offer, the only one that takes any interest in it is Hans Davion. The other three lords either blow it off completely or just put it down to some kind of maneuvering, some kind of trick, right? So this opens a dialogue. Hans Davion replies to Katrina Steiner, and they start this fairly slow negotiation and mediation. They start meeting with each other. They start sending ambassadors. They start trading ideas and concepts. And at some point, Hans Davion approaches Katrina with the idea of an actual marriage or a collaboration of the two houses in general. It is implied that if Katrina, and I know this anime version of Katrina would be when she was much younger, obviously, and not at the time of the 15 or so when this was all 20 when this was all going on. Katrina had been a bit younger. Hans would have proposed directly to her, and because she's not quite, her childbearing years are not quite behind her, but she's still up there in years. It's decided that Hans would marry Melissa Steiner, Katrina's young daughter, who at that time was a teenager. So obviously they still needed some years to work out all the details and to keep testing the grounds to see if there was any kind of actual chance that this union was going to work between the two great houses, and it would give time for Melissa to become of age. She needed to turn 18 to be legally married to Hans. So, at least the point two, let's see if I can bring that up here. I got these things set up backwards, so would you figure it out? The Armed Forces of Federated Sons, or the AFFS, had for the first time in recorded history since the SLDF, a well-trained, motivated, and encouraged command staff. Hans Davion trusted his senior officers to act accordingly to plan without being slaves to it. Through 5 years of exercises and various training operations, i.e. 3 Galahads with Operation Thor and a few others, the AFFS and the Lyran military proved to Hans Davion that large-scale operations were feasible. They also helped to confuse their opponents and allies to his intent. These operations, first off, if you look at all the house militaries have major flaws. They're either shorthanded, their command structure is stymied, or lack creative control. Of all the 5 great houses, it's always been, well, not always, but in the most recent view, that the Federated Sons military is the most effective. It has the most effective command structure and leadership, most importantly. Its officers are trained to think outside the box. They are encouraged to act independently in lieu of orders. So if a unit gets cut off, or a unit has oversight is delayed because of distance and time, the of all the house militaries, it's the Federated Sons military that's the most likely to stay proactive in a given situation. This is crucial. This is important. When you're talking large movements of troops over great distances with dodgy communications, you need to be able to trust that your field commanders are going to follow the plan. But you also got to have confidence that your field commanders are going to recognize when the plan has left the building and they need to adapt and improvise to continue the gain the success. So when we look at, and I've done videos on all this stuff, so I'm not going to go into depth on them, but we know that Draconis Combine has a really good command structure. Their command staff are very competent at what they do, but they're also quite painfully aware of the price for failure. So they're not encouraged. In fact, they're discouraged to think outside the box. They are discouraged for taking initiative. So if the senior command structure, for some reason or another, becomes separated from the rank and file, the rank and file are at a great disadvantage. I'm not saying that they freeze up and act like a bunch of turtles. No, they'll fight and defend themselves, but sometimes they'll go off on tangents. They'll go crazy to their own detriment. Or they'll be frozen in place because, once again, to their own detriment, they're just not conditioned to be proactive. The compelling Confederation, has a size problem. It simply doesn't have the resources and the troops that the other four great houses do. It's true that they have the much shorter distance to move troops. They're the smallest house, even though despite being physically, spatially, smallest house, they still have as much worlds as the Confederation, and it's, I believe, a slight advantage over the Commonwealth in actual worlds. So they have the numbers, and they have the shorter supply lines and the shorter transportation lines. What they don't have, once again, is a solid command structure, one that's capable of acting on its own effectively and to take preemptive control. There's a fear, and rightly so, in some corners of the leadership of the Confederation, of allowing too much autonomy to warlords and commanders, because they may turn on them. You keep your vicious dog on a chain for a reason. Sometimes that chain's a problem, especially if the problem's the bad guy's ripping your house off and your vicious dog's 10 feet away, but he can't get any closer because he's got a chain keeping him there. Just pointing that out. Free Worlds League, as we all well know, is a hot mess. Has always been a hot mess. And it just simply, it has some numbers, it has competent troops, it has competent command structure. But internal division hamstrings it. Most of its military forces don't directly answer to the high command, which means they can't be told to go do this. They can't be ordered to go help somebody else. They can't be sent outside their province to aid another province. Not without a lot of political skullduggery and manipulation, etc., etc. Things that take time. And then that brings us with the LCAF, the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces. Very competent leadership when they're allowed to lead. Their command structure is stratified, is a good word. Too many politically appointed commanders who don't have the experience or the savvy to actively command units in the field or to see the strategic pictures very well. They're too concerned about social situations and standing and position than they are enacting as a cohesive fighting force. That the troops themselves, and I've said this in the video on them, the troops themselves are very competent, if not slow. I don't want to call them lethargic because that's not fair either. But we have well established that the Commonwealth is top heavy in both command structure and equipment. So they're slow. They have lots of firepower, lots of staying power, but they don't have the ability to maneuver well. And then their command structure also does not have the ability to maneuver well. And the competent commanders they do have are hamstrung by needing to worry about the political and social generals who could supplement them, or so on and so forth. So this leaves us with the AFSF being the top dog in the military field. These maneuvers and some of those early negotiations between the two houses was an attempt to help mitigate and to fill in some of the crucial gaps and shortages that both the Federated Sons military and the Commonwealth military suffers from or enjoys. One of the things that makes the Federated Sons effective is that their ability to integrate all of their forces into a combined arms campaign, using everything in its place well, and their ability to maneuver and to get around and to adapt to the given situation. The downside, though, has always been that they don't have as much staying power. They don't have the heavy firepower that the Commonwealth has available to it. So the Federated Sons military, like the Draconis Combine, like the Compellents, are dominated by medium and light mechs. This makes for fairly flexible, robust, or flexible and maneuverable military, but it doesn't have the muscle it needs to when it really needs to have it, without needing to concentrate heavier numbers of forces. So part of the early negotiations is trade, and they're trading command officers. So the AFFF is the Federated Sons military. The AFFS is sending instructors and advisors to the Commonwealth to help teach them tactics and to open their minds. At the same time, Katrina is starting to clean up her military's command structure. She's starting to weed out or to separate the ones that these generals and commanders that really are not very effective from the ones that are. The Federated Sons military is gaining additional heavy and assault mechs and commercial support that they desperately need, or not say they just will really benefit from. Let's use that term desperate a little bit then. So we bring us to the compelling confederation. Prior to and leading up to and during the Fourth Succession War, the compelling confederation is led by a number of mentally unstable people, supported by a bunch of sycophants who basically are scared to death to tell them the facts, or are worried about their position. Maximilian Liao himself is so convinced about his own personal genius and his machinisms that he's thoroughly taken off guard when things go south. He doesn't handle sudden shock change very well. Two of his three children are also problems. His only son is estranged and no longer in the court or in a position to affect anything. His younger daughter is a nut. Romana Liao is a crazy person from the very earliest on, and she fires from the hip without thought. Well, she doesn't think of the ramifications of a lot of things typical of a younger woman. Let me rephrase that: a younger person, a teenager, with a lot of wealth and self-indulgence. Romano doesn't think about the bigger picture when it comes to action. She just decides, I want to punish somebody, or I want to accomplish something, and then we're going to do it. And it was a great thought and a great idea short term, and in the long term, it could have been something that would come out to be very, very bad. Once again, you want to get a really good feel, you got to read the Warrior Trilogy series and a few of the other novels to really, truly get the genius and the madness that is the Liao family. It's just the way it goes. Then Liao's military is weak. As I said, they're weak in numbers, and they're also weak in motivation. You have too much disparity. You have a handful of elite, well-motivated, well-trained, well-led units The warrior houses come to mind. McCarran's Armored Cavalry as the Merc Command at that time comes to mind. A couple of others. The bulk of the military, the militia units, the home guards, not so much. And they're just undergunned, they're under equipped, they're not modernized as much as their foes. They're also handicapped, because of the same paranoia that riddles the higher command structure and the nobility of the chancellery. It peters down into the military units, and it takes its toll on them. And then it's just a numbered game. The house is just, while it has planets and systems, its finances are not as well off as the rest. Technically speaking, they are the fourth poorest nation, or they're considered the fourth or the third. It's a tie between whether the Confederation or the Draconis Combine are the number 4 slot. Because economically speaking, the Federated Sons can fall into that bottom line too. You just don't have the money. Then we got this other problem that Liao's not really quite yet caught on to yet. House Liao is also riddled with top-level spies. It's not just one. There's quite a few, and then there's amongst them. There's such a convoluted system of distrust and machinism going on inside the Liao, the upper branches, so on and so forth, that we have them spying on each other and devoting resources better served to spying on their foes to keeping track of their own people, because that's the nature of the Confederation. Then we have Maximilian's hubris was also enhanced by his belief, and rightly so, in a lot of degree, his control over Michael Hasek Davion. He was leaning too much on Michael's intel. Neither men suspected that Hans Davion and Milo knew there was a connection between them and was spying on them. And neither of them were savvy enough or couldn't see that Hans did have this strong belief that he was being sold out by his brother-in-law, that he was able to use that treachery to his advantage, especially in that last year leading up to the Fourth Succession War. Enough so that he induces Michael to take the rope and hang himself. So at some point, Michael Hasek Davion, I don't want to say flees, but runs to Maximilian Liao with plans, and Maximilian Liao basically has him shot. This ironic thing is that he's shot by Michael Hasek Davion is shot and killed by Justin Allard, or Justin Ling, who is also Justin Allard, the oldest son of the minister Milo and a top spy within the Chancellor's inner circle. Excuse me, there I got it. All right, so then we go to House Merrick. House Merrick is still recovering from the effects of their civil war and are plagued by Federated Sons agents and provocateurs. One of the things that makes the Free Worlds League such a hot mess is the sheer amount of different political bodies. They have a nobility system, but they have about every imaginable governmental system that you can think of in play. And each one has its own quirks and intricacies and unique takes on things. There's some 20-odd minor houses that make up. Wherein the Federated Sons, you have 3. You have the House Davion, which is the overall House Lord, but the first Prince, quote, but they also are the Prince of the Crucis March. And then you have the Duke Sandoval and his family line, which basically is the Draconis March. And, of course, the Haseks, who control the Capellan March. And so we have just 3 major. There's a lot of minor nobles with them, but they all owe to one of those 3 big powers. It's similar to that in the Commonwealth. In the Commonwealth, there's about 4 major family political bodies. Off the top of my head, I can't go right off down the list on all of those. I know Morgan-Kell's family was one of them. There's the Lestrades, or however it is, until their line comes to an end. Of course, the Steiners themselves, and a couple more. The Draconis Combine is even more vague. It's implied through a lot of the story, especially in these later years, that the Combine is actually one big tool of the coordinator. That the Kurita family controls everything, and etc. But we also know from House Kurita's source book and other source material, i.e., canon, that that's not true. That there is a nobility system in play. There are warlords that are both appointed by the coordinator, but are also considered nobles. So the system's just not as pronounced. But there are at least 4 districts, that are individual, although they're have far less autonomy than the other houses. The coordinator does not allow them that autonomy. So Free Worlds League wasn't in good shape, politically or militarily, to do much at that point, nor was the Captain General Janos prepared to aid his allies. Out of all the House Lords, Janos was even more surprised by the Sun's Commonwealth offensive than Maximilian Liao. To further keep Merrick on the provincial back legs, Pavel Redzik, former chief military advisor to Liao and now head of the Tikhonov Free Republic, at the behest of Hans Davion, attacks the FDL toward the second year of the Fourth Succession War. This is to keep Pavel Redzik from getting any ideas in his head, keep him busy, keep his troops busy, to further weaken the Liao situation, the Capella Confederation situation, but to take some possible pressure off of that corridor, that fragile corridor that the Federated Commonwealth is building up between in and around Terra, to link them together. So to keep the Free Worlds League from getting adventurous, they're attacked. That's not to say that there wasn't some conflict. The Commonwealth and the Free Worlds League did have some minor confrontations along the border, but for the lion's share of the 2 years of the Fourth Succession War, the Free Worlds League was pretty much left out of it. They had been members of the Capian Treaty Accords or whatever, but I don't think Janus ever really truly believed he was going to be in a situation where he would have to step up and go toe to toe with the Compellans, or I mean the Confederate, the Commonwealth, because he just didn't. And the fact is, once again, Hans Davion and the agencies within the Federated Sons had been pretty active in trying to keep the Federated Sun, or the Free Worlds League, as a hot mess. They were definitely trying to stir up a lot of hate and discontent within the House, and to keep the House on its back legs and to keep it weak, which I have mixed opinions on why that was so. Apparently, Hans Davion felt that there was a need for it, or he felt it was an opportunity. Whether he was using that opportunity to train a lot of the spies and special units and stuff like that he would use later against the Compellans and the Combine, I don't know. But it sure seems to me that was a lot of effort, resources, and time devoted to something that, while it did pay off, its dividends weren't quite as high as it could have been. And there wasn't any real, unless it was intention was to destabilize them, to keep them from messing with the Commonwealth, that's only thing I can come up with. Right, but at the end of the day, Merrick is after the conclusion of the Civil War with his brother, and trying to put together, the Duchy of Andrian, agitating to get once again withdraw from the League, and other internal factors and problems. Plus, he's at his age; he's getting up there. He's just not in a position to do much to help them. This brings us to the Draconis Combine. While not planned or anticipated by Steiner or Davion, Wolf's Dragoons' feud with the DCMS, and more specifically Jamie Wolf's feud with Takashi Kurita, becomes a major distraction at a critical time in the war. Without direct leadership from their coordinator, most of the DCMS leadership and nobles were hamstrung. They were unable or unwilling to act on their own, with the exception of one, Theodore Kurita. First escaping several attempts by the LCAF forces to capture him, and then rallying a small cadre of senior officers and units to his banner, the Kuritan prince slash heir, with the tacit support of the ISF coordinator, takes on the Commonwealth and gaining successes that surprise both sides and preventing a total win on the combined Commonwealth front. So what we got here is this obsession with the, let's see, get that off. There we go. Wolf's Dragoons and the Draconis Combine. We had, if you go and look at the sheer volume, for love of Pete, Wolf's Dragoons can field the equivalent of 6 regiments, 5 line regiments, and a regiment made up of specialty battalions and support units. But pretty much 6 regiments, and maybe an equivalent of a regiment air wings worth of regimental size air wing of aerospace fighters. Against the Draconis Combine that can field 80 freaking battle mech regiments alone. Probably 300, 200, 300 mixed arms and tank, and infantry and aerospace command units. I mean, come on, really? Yeah, the Dragoons are elite unit. Don't be wrong. We find out later that they're trained by the clans and they got clan skills and clan tech as well. They're the baddest of the bad when it comes to mercenary commands and units. But a couple key crucial things take place. During their contract with House Kurita, which was coming to conclusion, they were under constant pressures from the particular warlord that had a grudge against them, and with instructions for procurement to delay or deny valuable and much needed resources to the Dragoons at every opportunity. Fortunately for the Dragoons, they have a lot of their own resources and or sources for materials, which helps alleviate these shortage issues, but it doesn't completely fix the problem. During their stay, not Yoriagi, but Takashi decides that he's going to form a Draconis Combine equivalent of the Wolves Dragoons. So he puts Manero in charge, and I'm coming on a draw on the fellow's the other half of his name. So anyway, this fellow becomes buddies with Jamie Wolf specifically. They have a lot in common. They have a lot of respect for each other. Miro's tasked by the coordinator to first start out with a battalion and then a regiment, and then from that regiment expand to 5 regiments of mech warriors and soldiers who were trained in the Draconis in the Wolf's Dragoons combined arms speciality and tactics. More importantly, they're trained to operate differently than the traditional DCMS, which causes some internal issues for everybody as well. It's toward the end there when and it's not the Jinyoshi either, it's the Ryukin. The Ryukin are ordered to go after the Dragoons and basically destroy them. During the opening gambit of the Fourth Succession War, when Hans Davion and Melissa Steiner have their engagement and pending wedding on Terra, at the reception after the wedding, or prior to the wedding, Takashi Kurita shows up and with his entourage, and then is accosted by Jamie Wolf, who throws the swords of Mariro on the ground and basically insults the coordinator in front of all of his peers, in front of the entire inner sphere, in such a way that Takashi has no other option but to respond. So probably a dozen regiments of mixed quality are sent after including the Ryukin, are sent after Wolf Dragoons to punish them, and Wolf Dragoons takes them all on. and beats the tar out of them at great cost. This personal feud plays a critical role in that first year of the Fourth Succession War. While the Commonwealth is hammering into the Combine on one frontier, Wolf's Dragoons is tying down and crushing key elements of the Combine's military on the other front. This kind of discourages Takashi from taking proactive act in defending his realm when he's focused on, first he's dealing with all this negativity and he's actually on his back heels, and then he's also obsessed with this issue on the front, on the one side. It's his son Theodore who steps up and steps in and starts to shine. And this, of course, is not well taken by elements within the Combine either. So this causes a lot of the hate and discontent, which works to the Federated Sons and the Commonwealth's advantage. The very fact that the Combine is distracted and divided means that they're not going to be as effective as they could have been. Had this gone the other direction, had this Fourth Succession War been an attempt to put down the Dragoons Combine, had the forces of the AFFS and the LCAF been combined to hit the Combine from both sides at the same time, Combine probably wouldn't be here, at least not as we know it. So the fact that it took so much of the resources of the Federated Sons to go after the Compellents, and it was all Federated Sons military might that went into the Confederation. The whole goal for the Commonwealth at the end of the day was just to tie up the Kuritans. Oh, sure, they wanted them to gain some territory. They wanted them to win. They were all rooting for it. In that first 6 months of the Fourth Succession War, the LCAF actually did a damn fine job. They took everybody by surprise, and they attacked across a wide front. Some 40 worlds were attacked and or captured during that first odd year. And it's toward the end of the first year, end of the second year, things start to come apart on the Commonwealth side. The command structure is now spread out, and they're falling back on their bad habits, their old habits. And so the pressure on the Combine is lessened. And in addition to that, Theodore's gaining traction. His responses and his counterattacks against the Commonwealth are effective. Even though at a crucial point, it's just his momentum gets the wind taken out of it by some I don't want to say last minute thinking, but some quick thinking by special forces of the Commonwealth and certain individuals who basically, while they don't destroy Theodore's jump ship fleet's ability to function, they do disable enough of his jump ships to prevent his counterstroke, which would have been pretty bad for the Confederation, from happening. It's these lessons that Theodore learned, that prepares him for the War of 3039. It's an eye-opener. He's also opened the eyes of a number of regimental commanders that perhaps the die-hard Bushido way, while still valuable, isn't the only way, and that the command structure of the DCMS can be improved. Just saying. So, daring, audacity, careful planning, well-placed skullduggery, a willing Archon and LCAF, as well as a secret technology, i.e. the black boxes, allowing the Sun's Commonwealth to radically alter the Intersphere's borders. More worlds exchanged hands in 2 years than had done so over the past 150 years. The Fourth Succession War is, in its own way, a unique situation, a unique thing. This occurs where the first time the borders of the Intersphere are radically altered. Now I wish I had pulled up a map for that. I don't know. Let's see if I can find one, because I know I got some. Because, I try to think of everything, I don't always have the luxury of thinking everything, no matter how much I'd like to. Should have had this one prepared too, because, you know, fortunately I kind of had some of this stuff filed under files. We have one that shows, no, of course not. I don't have a ready map of 30, 40. Anyway, okay. So at the end of the day, what we see here is this collusion of, or this coming together of a lot of unique opportunities to create the perfect war for the Allies, for the Commonwealth and the Sons. The aftermath of that, the conclusion of the Fourth Succession War, and the year, like 2 years or so after the Fourth Succession War, a lot of things change as well. The Razils district from the Draconis Combine is recognized as an independent body. In doing so, a lot of the worlds that are captured by the Commonwealth are ceded back to this new entity, with the exception of the ones in and around Terra, which allows this open corridor between the Sons and the Commonwealth to exist. A big chunk of the Confederation is dismembered. So the St. Ives Compact breaks away, the Tikhonov Union breaks away, and probably a good 15-20% of the core word section of the Confederation is captured by the other houses. In a couple cases, Free Worlds League and the Draconis Combine, or the Free Worlds League takes a few planets away from the Confederation as well. This puts the Confederation at a gross disadvantage for a generation. It also, much to the chagrin of the later FedCom, years later, the people downplay the Confederation as, being on the way out, and they make a massive recovery and return that takes place prior to or right at or during the clan invasion, or just after the clan invasion. We'll get to that eventually someday. Free Worlds League, Jados dies, Thomas takes over, some critical changes takes place that reinforces and makes the place stronger. Word of Blake gets entrenched, which isn't necessarily a great thing, but it still helps the Free Worlds League benefit. The clans invade, and the clans invade on the Commonwealth Draconis Combine front, which leaves the Sons in a better position than the Commonwealth side of the federal FedCom alliance, and the Confederation and the Free Worlds League can get a bye. They don't have to deal with the clans head on at that point. That changes many years later, as we know, if you kept in with stuff. So, like I said, we'll go back, and I'm running down on this now. So, why the Fourth Succession War was different and successful? I don't think at any point in the history of the Inner Sphere have we seen as much cooperation between two great houses as we do between Katrina Steiner and Melissa Steiner's Commonwealth and Hans Davion's Federated Sons. Of course, we know they don't go the distance. They fail. Victor's so tied up in fighting and defeating the clans, and that he's unable to function as the ruler of the Federated Commonwealth like he's supposed to. His sisters on one side, Katrina, or Kathleen / Katrina takes a great advantage of this and ends up usurping his position, and his younger sister, who's overseeing the Federated Sons section, is just she's just not up to the task, and this ends up seeing disillusion of the Federated Commonwealth and return of the two major houses in a slightly different form. It's kind of not totally surprising because it's typical. But what it also shows is, once again, just how special the era leading up to the Fourth Succession War is. We have basically a tired, worn out Free Worlds League at this point, a Draconis Combine that's obsessed with internal issues and division at a crucial time. It's attacked when all that weaknesses works to the advantage of their foes. The Confederation is the same problem. Its internal functionings is weak, and its command structure is strained and under political pressures from all kinds of different sources. But more importantly, the ruling house, the House Liao, Maximilian is on his way out. He's diminishing in his abilities, and he's blind to his failures, and it costs them. And he's replaced by his younger daughter Romano, who's bigger, crazier, is a crazier nut than he is. She lacks the political savvy and genius that her father has. She just has the crazy, which doesn't allow the Confederation to do well. It's not until her son Zhang Zhao takes over and things improve. So as you can see, it's just the way that the odds of it happening prior to this just wasn't going to be there. And everything I've read since, it's just things have gotten more chaotic with the inclusion of the clans and the constant shifting of things in the borders. These clans keep moving around and changing stuff, especially the Clan Wolf and the Jade Falcons. I mean, they really do a number on various elements of the great houses. It's just what it is. It's a great time for conflict, a great time for stories. Some of the best tabletop wargaming experiences and mech warrior experiences come out of this era. So much material, source book material, and lore and legend are based off of this. You know, this is a beautiful thing. This is one of the reasons that I think it opens the window for opportunity for for Catalyst to create things like this, because obviously there's so much. This is all conjecture and guesswork, and piece together bits and pieces of story lore that's been created over the last 40 years. And now that we have it, they put it together in a cohesive and entertaining way. So we have this much bigger, thicker understanding of the lore of the First Succession War, and just how different the Fourth Succession War was compared to what happens and vice versa. So I am looking forward, like I said, to reading this completely and getting a bigger picture, a deeper picture of expanding the lore we do know. And when I get the opportunity, and I've been, once again, finances are tight, are always tight, money goes. And I was lucky to have just enough to spend this one off, and it might be another 4 or 5 months before I can afford to get the second version, and hopefully I'll still be able to get it. Anyway, till next time, this is Rick, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.